There are words I've carried for so long they've become part of my silence. Words I've rehearsed in my head at 3 in the morning. Words I've almost said 100 times but stopped myself. Because what if saying them changed everything? What if the moment I spoke them out loud I couldn't take them back? But here's what I learned. The things we don't say don't just disappear. They build up. They become walls. And eventually the weight of what you're holding becomes heavier than the risk of letting it go. So I'm saying it now. Not because it's easy. Not because I have it all figured out. But because hiding what matters most isn't strength. It's fear dressed up as control. And I'm done pretending that silence protects anything worth keeping. This isn't a confession. It's a conversation I should have started a long time ago with you, with myself, with the part of me that's been waiting for permission to finally be honest. I've built rockets, I've built companies, I've solved problems that most people said were impossible. But sitting down and saying what I actually feel, that's been the hardest engineering challenge of my life. You'd think words would be simple. You'd think after everything I've done, everything I've risked, that telling someone what they mean to me would feel like nothing. But it's not nothing, it's everything. Because when you say it out loud, you hand someone the blueprint to your heart, and there's no version control, no undo button. I used to think vulnerability was weakness. I thought keeping things inside made me stronger, more focused, less distracted. I told myself that emotions were variables I could control if I just stayed disciplined enough. But here's what nobody told me. The things you suppress don't disappear. They don't optimize themselves into efficiency. They grow. They take up space, and eventually they start making decisions for you. Have you ever felt that too? That moment when you realize the silence you've been keeping isn't protecting you, it's isolating you. I spent years building systems, processes, frameworks. Everything had a logic. Everything had a reason. But love doesn't operate on logic. It doesn't follow a roadmap. It asks for something scarier than intelligence or ambition. It asks for presence. It asks for honesty. It asks for the kind of courage that has nothing to do with success or failure, just the willingness to be seen. And that terrified me because I could handle rejection in business. I could handle failure in engineering. Those things have data. They have feedback loops. You iterate, you improve. But emotional rejection, that's different. That's not a system you can debug. That's you raw, exposed, standing in front of someone and saying, "This is what I feel. This is who I am," when no one's watching. Wait, before you think I figured this out, let me be clear. I haven't. I'm still learning. I'm still unlearning. All the ways I taught myself not to need anyone. All. The ways I convinced myself that independence was the same as strength. But here's what changed. I realized that the most important message I could ever send wasn't to a team or a board or the world. It was to one person, to you. And I'd been drafting it in my head for so long that I forgot drafts don't mean anything until you hit send. So I'm sending it now, not because it's perfect, not because I have all the answers, but because the alternative, keeping it locked inside, waiting for the right time, pretending it doesn't matter, that was killing something in me. Something I didn't even realize I needed until I felt it slipping away. You know what's strange? People think emotional bravery is about grand gestures, big declarations, movie moments. But it's not. It's quieter than that. It's looking at someone and saying, "I don't know how to do this, but I'm trying." It's admitting that you're scared, that you care more than you're comfortable admitting, that you've been pretending to be fine when really you've been hoping they'd ask. Tell me, when was the last time you actually said what you meant? Not the polite version, not the safe version, the real version. Because I think most of us go through life editing ourselves in real time. We soften our words. We hedge our feelings. We protect ourselves from the possibility of being too much or not enough. And somewhere in all that self-P protection, we lose the connection we were trying to preserve in the first place. I used to think timing was everything. That if I just waited for the right moment, the right circumstance, the right level of certainty, then saying what I felt would be easier. But that's a lie we tell ourselves to avoid discomfort. There's never a perfect time to be vulnerable. There's only now. And the choice to either speak or stay silent. And that's when everything I believed fell apart. I realized that all the things I thought were keeping me safe, controlled distance, strategic timing, weren't protecting me. They were keeping me from the one thing that actually matters. Real connection, not transactional, not conditional, just honest. So I stopped waiting. I stopped rehearsing. I stopped trying to find the perfect words, because the perfect words don't exist. What exists is the willingness to say something imperfect and true instead of something polished and empty. And maybe that's what love is really. Not the absence of fear, not the presence of certainty, but the decision to speak anyway, to risk being misunderstood, to risk being too much. To risk the possibility that what you feel might not be returned in the exact way you hoped. Because here's what I know now. The regret of silence is heavier than the risk of honesty. The relationships that matter most aren't built on perfection. They're built on moments like this, when you stop performing and start confessing. When you stop trying to impress and start trying to connect. Look at me when I say this. I've been hiding what I feel. Because I was afraid of what it would mean. Afraid of what it would change. Afraid that once I said it, I couldn't unsay it. But I don't want to hide anymore. Not from you. Not from myself. This is me finally saying what I've been carrying. Not because I expect anything. Not because I need a specific response. But because you deserve to know. And I deserve to stop pretending that staying quiet was ever the same as staying safe. There's a strange thing that happens when you finally decide to stop hiding. The fear doesn't go away. It just changes shape. It stops being about whether you should say something and becomes about what happens after you do. I've launched things into space. I've bet everything on ideas people said would fail. But none of that prepared me for this, for the moment. After you've spoken your truth and you're just standing there waiting exposed, no control over what comes next. And maybe that's the point, because control is the thing we reach for when we're afraid of being hurt. We think if we can just manage the outcome, orchestrate the response, time it perfectly, then we won't have to face the raw uncertainty of being truly seen. But love doesn't work that way. Connection doesn't work that way. You can't engineer intimacy. You can't optimize vulnerability. You just have to let it exist. Don't pretend you haven't felt it. That moment when you realize the thing you've been protecting yourself from isn't rejection. It's the loss of control that comes with actually caring. Because when you care, you give someone access, not just to your time or your attention, but to the parts of you that don't have defenses, the parts that hope, the parts that need. I spent years building armor. I told myself it was focus, discipline, resilience, but really it was just fear wearing a productivity mask. Fear that if I let someone in, if I admitted how much I needed connection, I'd lose the edge that made me effective, that it'd become soft, distracted, less. But here's what nobody told me. Odd. The opposite is true. The armor doesn't make you stronger. It makes you hollow. It keeps you functional, but not alive. And the things you achieve while hiding behind it, they feel empty. Because success without connection isn't success. It's just motion, just noise, just proof that you can survive alone. Which was never the question you needed answered. Have you ever built something incredible and then looked around and realized there was no one to share it with? Not really share it, not celebrate with, just be with, without explanation, without performance, just presence. That's what I've been missing, and I didn't even realize it until I stopped long enough to feel it. I used to think emotions were distractions, variables that introduced inefficiency into an otherwise logical system. But emotions aren't distractions, they're signals. They're the data you need to understand what actually matters. And I'd been ignoring the most important signal of all, He won telling me that what I was building externally meant nothing if I was breaking internally. So I made a choice, not a comfortable one, not an easy one, but a necessary one. I decided to stop treating vulnerability like a weakness to manage and start treating it like a language to learn. Because that's what it is. It's not about being fragile. It's about being honest. It's about saying, this is what I feel, and I'm not going to apologize for it or dress it up or wait for permission to meet. And I rhyme for whatever I did, the sub guy, the man, whatever, because when you stop hiding, you stop performing. When you stop performing, you stop exhausting yourself trying to be the version of you that you think people need. And when you stop doing that, something strange happens. You become more yourself. More whole, more real. But here's what scared me most. What if being real wasn't enough? What if the version of me without the armor, without the accomplishments, without the carefully constructed narrative, what if that version wasn't worth staying for? Wait, before you think that's just insecurity talking, let me say this. It's not about self-doubt. It's about recognizing that for years I built my identity around what I could do, not who I was. And stripping that away. That's terrifying because it forces you to ask a question you've been avoiding. Am I lovable without the resume? And the only way to answer that is to let someone see you without it. That's what this is, it's what I've been hiding from. Not the fear of rejection, the fear of being loved for who I actually am instead of what I can provide. Because if you're loved for what you do, you can always do more. But if you're loved for who you are, that requires you to believe you're enough as you are. And I wasn't sure I believed that. So I hid. I stayed busy. I stayed useful. I made sure there was always a reason to keep me around that had nothing to do with my heart and everything to do with my output. And I told myself that was safer. But it wasn't safer. It was lonelier. And eventually the loneliness became louder than the fear. You know what's strange? People think honesty is about saying the right thing, but it's not. It's about saying the true thing, even when it's messy, even when it doesn't sound like you've rehearsed it, even when you don't know how it'll be received. Because the alternative is spending your life in translation, saying what you think people want to hear, editing yourself down to something palatable. And the problem with that is even if they love you, they're loving a version of you that doesn't fully exist. A version you have to maintain, a version that exhausts you. And I'm tired, not physically, emotionally. I'm tired of curating. I'm tired of protecting. I'm tired of pretending that independence is the same as fulfillment. So here's what I'm saying. I need you. Not in a weak way. Not in a desperate way. But in the way that acknowledges the connection is optional for a meaningful life. That being seen isn't a luxury. That love isn't something you add when everything else is figured out. It's the thing that makes everything else matter. And I've been too afraid to say that, too proud, too convinced that needing someone meant I'd failed at being self-sufficient. But self-sufficiency isn't the goal. Wholeness is. And wholeness requires connection. It requires trust. It requires the willingness to say, I don't have this figured out, but I want to figure it out with you. That's what I've been hiding in my heart. Not a perfect declaration. Not a flawless sentiment. Just this, the admission that I care more than I've been willing to show. That you matter more than I've been willing to say. That the silence I've been keeping wasn't protecting anything, it was just keeping me alone. And I don't want to be alone anymore. Not in the way that matters. There's something I need you to understand. When I say I've been hiding what I feel, I don't mean I've been pretending not to care. I mean I've been pretending it was manageable, containable, something I could schedule around. But feelings don't wait for the right quarter. They don't pause while you optimize other areas of your life. They exist whether you acknowledge them or not. And the longer you ignore them, the louder they become. I learned this the hard way. I thought I could compartmentalize work here, emotions there, keep everything in its proper container, and nothing would flow. But humans don't work that way. You can't partition your heart like you partition a hard drive. Everything bleeds into everything. What you feel affects what you build. What you suppress affects what you show up as. And I wasn't showing up, not really. I was performing, managing, executing, but presence that requires something different. That requires you to stop dividing yourself into acceptable pieces and just exist as one whole complicated, imperfect person. You know what I realized? The reason I kept delaying this conversation wasn't because I didn't know what to say. It's because saying it would make it real. And once it's real, I can't take it back. I can't pretend it doesn't matter. I can't retreat into the safety of ambiguity. But here's what changed everything. I stopped seeing that as a problem and started seeing it as the point. Because ambiguity isn't safety, it's suspension. It's living in the waiting room of your own life, hoping circumstances will decide for you. And I've built too much, risked too much, fought too hard to let fear make my most important decisions, so I'm making this one. I'm saying what I mean. Not what's convenient, not what's strategic, what's true. I care about you more than I've been willing to admit, more than I've been comfortable showing. And I've spent too long pretending that keeping that hidden was somehow noble, somehow protective. But it wasn't protecting either of us, it was just creating distance where there didn't need to be any. Tell me, have you ever loved someone and been too afraid to let them know how much? Not because you thought they'd leave, but because you thought the intensity of it might scare them, might scare you. That's where I've been, in that space between feeling everything and saying nothing, convinced that somehow the gap between the two was protecting something valuable. All it was protecting was my ego, my control, my illusion that I could care deeply without being affected deeply. And that illusion is exhausting because real connection doesn't come from managing your feelings. It comes from expressing them. Not perfectly, not strategically, just honestly with the full knowledge that honesty is risky and necessary and the only thing that actually builds something real. So here's what I'm offering. Not certainty, not a perfect plan, just presence, just the willingness to stop hiding and start existing in the same space as my feelings, instead of above them. I don't know what happens next. I don't know if saying this changes anything or if it just changes me, but I know this, the version of me that stays silent, that plays it safe, that protects himself from the possibility of being too much. That version doesn't get to build the kind of life I actually want. And I want a life where the most important things aren't the things I've accomplished. They're the people I've been honest with, the moments I've been present for, The times I chose connection over control. This is one of those times I've said what I needed to say. Not because I expect anything, not because there's a right response, but because you deserve to know, and I deserve to stop carrying it alone. That's what I've been hiding in my heart, and now it's yours. There's a moment after you finally said what you've been holding that feels like freeall. No safety net, no backup plan, just you and the truth you've released into the world, waiting to see where it lands. I'm in that moment now. And here's what's strange about it. I thought I'd feel regret. I thought the second the words left my mouth, I'd want to pull them back, soften them, qualify them, make them easier to dismiss. But I don't. For the first time in years, I feel lighter. Not because I know what happens next, but because I finally stopped pretending I didn't care. That's the thing about emotional honesty. It doesn't solve everything. It doesn't guarantee outcomes, but it does something more important. It aligns you with yourself. It closes the gap between who you are and who you're pretending to be. And that alignment, that's freedom. I've spent my life chasing difficult problems, building things that shouldn't work, pushing against limits people said were fixed. But the hardest thing I've ever done, sitting still long enough to feel what I actually feel. No distraction, no optimization, just the raw, uncomfortable truth of what matters. And what matters is this. Connection isn't something you earn. It's something you choose every day, with every word, with every moment you decide to show up as yourself, instead of as the version you think is safer. Have you ever noticed how we build walls without realizing it? How we protect ourselves so gradually that we don't even see it happening? One small edit here, one withheld truth there, until eventually the person standing in front of someone isn't really you at all. It's a performance, a composite, a version designed to minimize risk. But minimizing risk also minimizes connection, because connection requires exposure. It requires the willingness to be wrong, to be misunderstood, to care about something more than you care about controlling how it ends. And I'm done controlling. I'm done managing. I'm done treating my heart like it's a project that needs a roadmap and a timeline and measurable outcomes. Because love isn't a project. Trust isn't an algorithm. Presence isn't something you schedule between meetings. These things require you to be undefended, unstrategic, unafraid of the possibility that caring might hurt. But here's what I finally understood. The hurt of caring is nothing compared to the emptiness of not caring. The risk of vulnerability is nothing compared to the certainty of isolation. And the fear of being too much is nothing compared to the tragedy of never being enough, because you never let anyone see who you actually are. So I'm letting you see, not the polished version, not the highlight reel, the real version, the one that doesn't have all the answers, the one that's still learning how to say what he means without apologizing for it. This is me, unedited, uncertain, but finally honest. And maybe that's all any of us can offer. Not perfection, not guarantees, just the willingness to stop hiding, to stop waiting for the right moment, to stop pretending that silence is somehow more dignified than truth. Because it's not. Silence is just fear in disguise. And I've let fear make too many of my decisions. I've let it tell me when to speak and when to stay quiet, when to risk and when to retreat. And every time I listened to it, I stayed safe. But I also stayed alone. And I don't want to stay alone anymore. Not when the alternative is this. Standing in front of you, undefended, saying exactly what I mean. I've been hiding this in my heart for too long. And now it's out. Now it's real. Now it exists between us instead of just inside me. And whatever happens next, I know this. I finally said it. And that changes everything. You want to know what the scariest part of all this is? It's not the possibility that you won't feel the same way. It's not even the possibility that saying this changes everything between us. It's the possibility that I could have said this sooner, that I've wasted time, that all those moments I stayed quiet, all those conversations where I almost said it but didn't. That those moments are gone and I can't get them back. That's the real cost of hiding. Not what you lose by speaking, what you lose by staying silent. I think about all the times I convinced myself I was being strategic, patient, waiting for the right circumstances. But I wasn't being strategic, I was being afraid. And I dressed that fear up as wisdom, as discipline, as respect for timing. But timing is just another word for delay when you already know what you need to say. And I've studied you for a while now. I've known every time I looked at you and felt something shift. Every time a conversation with you felt different than conversations with anyone else. Every time. I caught myself thinking about you when I should have been thinking about anything else I knew. I just wasn't ready to admit. I knew because admitting it meant I had to do something about it. And doing something about it meant risking the one Thing I've spent my whole life trying to avoid losing control. But here's what I finally learned. Control is overrated. Control is what you cling to when you're more afraid of uncertainty than you are interested in possibility. And I've been so focused on controlling outcomes that I forgot to actually live in the moments that matter. This is one of those moments, not because it's perfect, not because I've timed it right, but because it's real. And real is more important than perfect. Real is what builds something that lasts. Real is what makes you feel alive instead of just functional. Look at me when I say this. I don't need you to have an answer right now. I don't need you to match my intensity or mirror my feelings or tell me everything's going to work out exactly how I hope. I just need you to know. That's all. Just know that this is how I feel, that you matter, that the time we spend together isn't casual for me, that when I think about what I want my life to look like, you're in it. Not as a convenience, not as an option, as a priority. And maybe that sounds like pressure. Maybe it sounds like too much too soon. But I'd rather be too honest than not honest enough. I'd rather give you the full truth and let you decide what to do with it than give you a diluted version that protects my ego but doesn't reflect reality. So here it is. The full truth, unfiltered, unstrategic. Just what I've been carrying and what I finally had the courage to say. I care about you. I want you in my life. Not as someone I'm figuring out. Not as someone I'm casually interested in. As someone I'm choosing. Deliberately, consciously, with full awareness of what that means. And I know that puts something on the table between us. I know that changes the dynamic. But I'd rather change the dynamic than continue living in the gap between what I feel and what I show. Because that gap, that's where connection goes to die. That's where honesty gets replaced by performance. That's where two people who could have meant something to each other stay safe and stay separate and eventually drift apart, wondering what could have been. And I don't want to wonder, I want to know. Even if knowing means risking. Even if risking means hurting. Because the alternative is this. Years from now, looking back and realizing I had the chance to be honest and I chose comfort instead. And that's not a regret I can live with. So I'm saying it now while it matters, while you're here, while there's still time to build something real instead of something careful. This is what I've been hiding in my heart. And now it's yours to hold. There's something peaceful about finally letting go of what you've been holding. Not the peace of resolution, the peace of honesty, of alignment, of knowing that whatever happens next, at least you showed up as yourself. That's where I am now. Not at the end of something, at the beginning. The beginning of what it means to live without the weight of unsaid things, without the exhaustion of pretending, without the distance that silence creates between who you are and who you're willing to show. And I won't lie to you, it's uncomfortable because when you spend years building walls, taking them down feels exposing. You feel the air differently. You notice your own heartbeat. You realize how much energy you were spending on protection that could have been spent on connection. But discomfort isn't the same as wrong. Sometimes discomfort is just growth in real time. It's your system recalibrating. It's you learning to exist in a new way. And that new way, it feels more like living than anything I've done in years. Because this is living, not achieving, not optimizing, just being present with what you feel. And trusting that presence is enough, that you don't have to perform your way into being loved. You don't have to earn your way into mattering. You just have to be willing to be seen. And I'm willing finally, completely without reservation. Have you ever stood at the edge of something and realized the only thing stopping you from moving forward was your own fear? Not circumstance, not timing, just fear dressed up as patience, as caution, as wisdom. That's where I've been standing. And I'm stepping forward now. Not because I'm suddenly fearless, but because I finally understand that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision to move anyway, to speak anyway, to risk anyway. And this is my risk. These words, this honesty, this willingness to say exactly what I mean and trust that whatever happens, I'll be okay. Because I'd rather be okay and honest than safe and hidden. So here's what I want you to take from this. Not pressure, not expectation, just knowledge. Knowledge that you matter, that what we have matters, that I'm not interested in pretending otherwise. I've spent too much of my life in conversations I didn't mean, in relationship I didn't choose, in versions of myself that were acceptable but not authentic. And I'm done with that. I'm done with safe. I'm done with strategic. I'm done with the distance between what I feel and what I say. I want real. I want present. I want the kind of connection that doesn't require performance, just presence. Just two people willing to be honest about what they feel and brave enough to say it out loud. And that starts with this. With me saying what I've been hiding. With me trusting that honesty is more valuable than comfort. With me choosing you, choosing us. Choosing the possibility of something real over the certainty of something safe. This is what I've been carrying. This is what I needed you to know. Not because I need something from you, but because hiding it was costing me something. I couldn't afford to lose the ability to be fully present in my own life. And I'm present now here with you, undefended, unedited, just me. So thank you for listening.